Everyone, the video you've been all waiting for, the very first Core 2.0 gameplay video on my channel. Now, when I saw the contents of Core 2.0, the very first thing I wanted to do so bad was to prove to everyone that it was possible to play with the most underwhelming faction of all, NBN. That's right. So yeah, if you watched the Core 2.0 corp site discussion video, which went up sometime last week, you would know that, yeah, NBN came out of this Core 2.0 end rotation very far behind. They lost, like, to give an anecdote, I was dismantling a deck that I built, physically built, and I was separating. It was an NBN deck that was trying to get big money with bias reporting and, you know, flood the runner with mid-seasons tags. So I was dismantling it and separating it into rotated cards and existing cards, and I realized that the rotated card stack ended up being nearly as large as the existing stack itself. Nearly half of my entire deck rotated out at once. You have my big burst money, the sweep, the restructures, you have the tagging, the mid-seasons, and of course the big agendas, the breaking newses, the Astro script. So my gosh, NBN lost so much, it was ridiculous. Yeah, and this gives rise to a very big problem that every single NBN player will have to face now. That is that you need to find some way to punish the runner for running, because they no longer have any threats. If most of the time the runner can just sit back and wait for you to advance an agenda, because you have no other way to win. You cannot proactively tag them to kill them. You cannot fast advance, because all the fast advance tools are gone. Your shipments and Astros and Sand City Grid is gone. So basically, you need to find a way to punish them when they actually do run on your advanced agendas, and that is a really challenging task. I've been looking at some other traits, some other reasons why you want to play NBN. One of the things that NBN has been known for, especially in the recent cycles with the pushing of ice such as IP block, is that they have a lot of cheap to res and taxing ice. They don't end the run, but they're tracers that typically drop tags on the runner. You also have equally powerful assets, some of which serve a very unique purpose compared to the other factions. The other factions don't really have any card filtering abilities, and NBN is known for that. Your Sensi Union, your DBS, these cards can help elevate the lack of Jackson Howard, which is something that a lot of corps will miss post rotation. Not to mention that NBN is equally good at defense. You have asset defense in your ID ability CTM, and you have a defensive agenda in QPM, which can now take the place of breaking news. As such, NBN has completely shifted. I've said this in the Core 2 review video, but I'll say it again. NBN is no longer a proactive tagging faction. Tags have now shifted to becoming very reactive, very defensive. Runners will not get tagged unless they actually run, and you have some tools to punish them passively, but most of them are just, you know, wait and see approaches. You're not really doing anything to advance your game other than to advance agendas. But when you do advance agendas, you want to be able to unreasonably tax the opponent out using nasty ice and assets that just punish the runner for running. As such, I came out with a first draft of a CTM deck that looks something like this. The main interaction is forcing the runner to run on an advanced agenda behind a Data Raven and click compressing them by raising a Zealous Judge right after that. Having to contest the Zealous Judge with the effect of CTM up, as well as the agenda, in theory should make it difficult for the runner to deal with. I went up against a Leela deck, and much to everyone's chagrin, I lost horrendously. I got wiped, or rather I ended up wiping the floor with myself. This CTM deck just didn't work. And from those games, I'm not going to put them here because they were really one-sided, but what I can say is that I realized that NBN can no longer afford to have dual win conditions. One of the most powerful aspects of NBN in the past is you look at a deck like Butcher Shop, which has both fast advance and kill components, or something like the CTM deck at Worlds, which had the early rushing capability balanced with the late game tag storm ability to get psychographics, close accounts, and exchange out. No more is that the case. Because NBN's card pool is so horridly narrowed, you cannot afford to diversify your options. You have to go all in on the asset spam and all in on the tracers. And when I look at this deck, immediately I can see that it has a lot of room for tuning. For starters, if you look at my economy, there is asset economy in the 4-pack campaign and operation economy with the burst econ. That does not sit at all. This deck does not need burst econ because I'm not trying to land an early hard-hitting news or early mid-seasons. In fact, this deck cannot rush at all. There's too little end-to-run ice, and there's no incentive to push agendas out early because look at your agenda suite. Most of these agendas do nothing on score. These are not astro scripts. Why would you try to score agendas? This is what Core 2 is saying. It's not my fault that I'm playing such a passive deck, but Core 2 is saying we take away all the proactive agendas in the breaking news and the astro script. So now you're left with passive agendas. You're compelled to not score them. It's as simple as that. What about my ice? Same thing. I'm not focusing on the type of ice that will punish my opponent the most, which is cheap to res, tracers that are taxing. So as such, there's no space in this deck for things like Pop-Up Window and Toll Wolf. In fact, there's way too much ice in this deck. You don't need that much ice. I came up with a revised version that swaps all these cards out for assets, and as such, I managed to increase the amount of assets in my deck by 2/3. Here is an updated version of my list that looks way better. It looks disgusting, it looks ugly, and that's because it's asset spam. But again, that's not my fault. Core 2.0 is pushing me to a very passive style of game, and as such, you want to play lots of assets that secure your board state. You have Aria Butter Tech and the Primary Transmission Dish, or the Petri Dish for short. These two combo together to make these eyes really terrifying. You're forced to break them. You can't really trace through them, because if you do, well, you're going to fail the traces, and you're going to lose money from Aria Butter Tech on top of that. So this is the direction you have to go with NBN. Find the assets and ice that synergize directly with each other and play a critical mass of them. And by critical mass, I mean spam them. Spam them so hard. In case you're wondering, the news now hours in this deck are simply because, well, with NBN has lost one of its key abilities in removing currents by scoring a 2-1 from the hand. Without the 3 copies of breaking news, currents are especially scary because E-Strike negates your ID ability, and worse still, Hacktivist negates your entire asset spam plan. So you need the news now hours to prevent these currents from going online in the first place. We'll see how this deck fares in the gameplay video. Sit tight, it's gonna be a grindy one. Alright, today we are up against Smoke, and yes, you can see the screen is quite zoomed out, almost preempting what's gonna happen. I look at my opening hand, it has DBS in there, but I need more assets. I want Sensi in my opening hand, and I immediately regret my life decisions. I mulled into 2 bills and a global food. Well, that didn't end well. My opponent Temujin's Archives, so when I draw an ice, I'm gonna put it on Archives. Well, that's pretty obvious. I can't let my opponent get too rich. So if they get too rich, they can easily contest my assets, and that's really bad news. I draw into both of my hard-hitting users in quick succession, but I'm not sure how much that'll help because my opponent has a good Temujin going. But now that they are running this IP block, things might become a bit more tricky for them. They're gonna lose 3 credits here just to gain 4 credits. Doesn't seem very worth it. Well, at least forcing me to spend the 2 credits to rest IP block here is going to hamper my economy for the short term, but I'm in this for the long haul. Now I see the silver lining in the cloud. I found my Sensei Actors Union, and my opponent actually does run on it. Very good choice, and they actually do choose to trash it, which is the smart thing to do. Unfortunately for them, that will incur a tag on them, and that basically equalizes the credit level. It's pretty expensive to trash that Sensei Actors Union. They have to pay 2 credits to trash it, and another 2 credits to clear the tag, and a click. So that's 2 clicks and 2 credits. And they faceplant an Archangel on the last click. I was about to hit a yes, but I look at the board. There's not much that's worth me spending 3 credits on an Archangel, so I'm actually letting my opponent pass that for now. I sneak a Beal on the table, seeing that our credit levels are roughly equal. Given that, since if they run it and they choose to, they might put themselves in hard hitting news range. So I figured that this was a good time to sneak a bill on the table right after they trashed a Sensi, and sure enough, they did not check the bill. But if you remember what I said at the introduction of this video, this new age NBN has no interest whatsoever in scoring agendas early. That bill is only going to be worth 2 points to me. It doesn't confer any benefit on my board state. In fact, it makes me lose an entire turn and 3 credits. Why should I score the bill now? Having a naked bill on the table actually has its benefits. Assuming my opponent is running Clot, having a bill on the table means that if they do decide to go tag me at any point, I don't have to worry about Clot lock, because I can just straight away cycle the bill on the table for an instant victory. So this is something I'm keeping in mind. But for now, the bill will stay on the table as it is, and I'm still in no hurry to res it. What I want to do is to get my Mumble Temple working. So some ice would be good. Now I'm considering whether to ice up the Mumble Temple of mine. I'm thinking a bit on this. It's a pretty difficult decision. I decided to draw first to see my options, but I end up drawing into more agendas. This is not good. I was forced to place my third piece of ice on HQ as the second layer ice rather than on R&D. You normally expect one ice on each central, but given that I haven't scored a single agenda yet, there have been no Jackson users yet because Jackson is dead, you have to expect that there are so many agendas in HQ, and sure enough, that is the case. So HQ needed to be properly defended, and I needed to be aware that I could never go below 10 credits. I needed to have Raven into Data Ward. I believe that's what's on HQ, active at all times. Now, Raven Data Ward is usually a very good combo. Most runners won't be able to deal with it very well, given how taxing both pieces of ice are. But my opponent has the exact tech for this combo. Yep, you saw it. It's the Hunting Grounds they installed early on, and that Hunting Grounds is going to be so good against NBN. All my eyes have some form of on-encounter component, or at least a lot of them. And having Hunting Grounds new to them is a big loss, especially Data Raven. Because this deck does rely on the runner taking Data Raven tags to activate things like Zealous Judge or Data Ward. But without that, well, my ice is going to be far less taxing, and my win con is going to be a lot harder to achieve. So yeah, even though this is actually one of the better matchups I could ask for in terms of having a zero-link runner that cannot really contest my assets, at the end of the day, it's still really difficult to get past Hunting Grounds. I need to find an innovative way to do this, and I decide that since my opponent decided to make a run on my Petri dish, now is the time to land a hard-hitting news, especially after drawing the Sensi Actors Union from DBS. Now, I know full well my opponent can actually contest this hard-hitting news by clearing all 4 tags, but if they do that, they'll let me get a Sensi Actors Fire. So that'll be great. Not to mention that this isn't going to set me back economically, because I have the Petri dish there, which subsidized 3 of my trace credit costs. So while it didn't cost me that much to land a hard-hitting news, I was able to force my opponent to spend an entire turn clearing tags and allow me to get a free Sensi Actors Union off. You bet I'm going to take advantage of this. So, Sensi draws me a bunch of cards, but most importantly, I can bury the global food here, doing a pseudo Jackson. And then I realized, wait, why can't I bury this? Turns out I need to do the DBS trigger before the Sensi trigger. That makes sense. I forgot about the DBS trigger, and I end up having to manually do this. But anyway, I'm going to use Sensi to bury the food and use DBS to bury probably the psychographics here. Maybe the Data Ward, because Hunting Grounds is a thing. So a pretty tough decision there. Both make sense, but given that my opponent is pretty intent on staying clear of tags, which is probably the best given that they are so reliant on net marker, I'm probably not going to see much use for Psycho right now. It's at the bottom of my deck. It'll come back up sometime later, so it's not gone forever. I don't have to worry about it being gone. Yep, so I continue setting up my board state. What I really want to do is to get a critical mass of Aryabata tags and Petri dishes going, such that whenever my opponent attempts to let a trace fire, for example, if they try to trash any of my assets, they will be overwhelmed, because every CTM fire is a trace 4 plus 3 from Petri dish. That's a trace 7. They cannot afford to pay 7 into the trace, and if they do not pay into the trace, not only do they have to clear the tag, that the trace gives them, they also suffer the losses from Aryabhata tech. That is the prison lock that I'm trying to achieve here. Jinteki does it with bioethics. Wayland does it with, I don't know. What does Wayland do? I have no idea. But anyway, NBN does it with Aryabhata tech and Petri dish. So that's the intention here. And just to completely unlock my opponent, who is trying to get econ with Blue Moose, well, no such luck. I res the blacklist here, and now they are officially locked. They cannot trash the blacklist, because if they do, they're gonna take a big trace to the face. And while they were busy clearing tags from my second hard-hitting news, I did score the build that was face down for quite some time. This was the second build I sneaked out on the table, by the way, if you didn't notice. The first build I sneaked out is still there. It's on the 4th server from HQ. It's the only face down there, and yeah, I'm pretty happy that my opponent still hasn't checked it. I'm just gonna score it right here, right now. This really puts the pressure on my opponent, because at this point I realized that I could get the win without even needing to threaten psychographics. All I need to do is to score 3 builds, all 3 of the builds in my deck, and one of my Quantum Kitties. The Quantum Kitty is not too hard. I just need to stack 2 Ravens on a remote, and my opponent will have no way to contest the Quantum Kitty. Most traditional shapers, if you remember the good old pre-rotation days, use New Angeles City Hall. That was a very common include in smoke decks, but now New Angeles City Hall is rotated, so no more tag avoidance. The QPM is free for me, barring Film Critic shenanigans. Yeah. Build, not so much. I need to find some way to sneak the 3rd build on the board without my opponent checking it. And that is actually quite critical for both of us, even though I'm in the lead. If my opponent steals the 3rd build, I will actually have no way to threaten the win anymore by never advancing agendas. And that's a very, very big problem. So this 3rd build, even though I'm in the lead, it's still a 50-50. If my opponent checks it, they could very well win. If I sneak it on the board, there's a good chance that I'll win instead. So now my task is to drag my opponent through checking my remotes as much as possible. One thing I can usually do is to just keep spamming assets. Every time I draw an asset, you see the News Now Hour in my hand. Probably not relevant in this matchup. You see the Pair Campaign in my hand. The money I probably don't need in this matchup. I'm just gonna slowly chuck them in remotes and force them to spend every single click checking them, because the moment they fail to check any of my assets, that could be the game-winning build for me, or at least very close to game-winning build. Yeah, so I'm down to doing that. Doing never advance shenanigans and forcing them to check every single one of my assets. That's the strength of asset spam, and that is why it's so oppressive, because you feel like you're being forced to lose clicks because you need to check those assets. I still don't draw my 3rd build, so now's a good time to keep spamming out assets. I throw two assets out, 2 important assets and 1 useless asset I'm using as remote bait. This looks like the 3rd build. Looks like you have to go for it. So I'm hoping to be able to bait my opponent into running that remote for me. They first check the new Aryabhata tech. I mean, this turn really does look like a turn where I'm trying to push out the build, because I'm installing 3 assets out at the same time. So they have to check every single one of them. They'll be click compressed as heck. So they failed to find it in the naked remotes. Now they're going for my ice remote on the last click. They can afford to go last click because, well, they have hunting grounds to get past my Raven. But the IP block actually stops them. Hard walls them, because they do not have their barrier breaker out. This is gonna hurt. A trace 3 boosted to 6. Yeah. Ouch. And that is a very nasty boost, but they actually paid into it so that they can get past the end of the run, only to see the News Now Hour. So I successfully tagged them out, and I'm about to land a hard-hitting news. Nope, there's no hard-hitting news in my hand. Guess what? I only run 2 copies, and they're both in the bin. This is the problem with a post-Jackson world. There are so few proactive tagging mechanisms in NBN. Basically, hard-hitting news is the only one that can effectively tag the runner. You have seesaws, you have threat level alpha, but those are very low power level. They only do 1 tag to an untagged runner. That is definitely not enough to win a game. So hard-hitting news is your only viable way to proactively tag, and you only can run 3 copies of it in your deck. In my case, I only run 2 because there just aren't enough deck slots. What does this mean? This means that after I landed both hard-hitting users in the mid-game, I'm stuck with only passive tagging mechanisms remaining. And this just leads to a very grindy game. Normally, if I had access to Jackson Howard, I would simply shuffle those hard-hitting users back in my deck. I would draw them eventually due to my powerful draw, and probably just end the game there by landing that hard-hitting news. Look at the economy. They'll be forced to use most of their net Merkle money to clear tax, and I would be able to leverage that as a scoring window to actually push agendas out. But no! Screw proactive win cons, screw breaking news, screw mid-seasons. Well, let's play the slow game. That's the only thing I can do. So without access to hard-hitting news, I'm forced to wait until my opponent makes a mistake. Maybe this is it. They're trying to index me through an R&D, but I have Mamba Temple credits and I have a couple of credits in my stash. I'm going to res this Sync BRE, which is going to do absolutely nothing. Yeah, Smoke's a pretty good counter for this. They just need 4 credits, 2 of which must be stealth, but that's no biggie. They're going to get through easily. So yeah, I couldn't adequately defend this server, which was rather unfortunate. I was trying to save a bit of money because I do have a project build in hand. This is going to be key. I hope they waste time on R&D and neglect HQ, because I have a very important agenda in hand that I need to push out. So they do an indexing. I'm wondering if they hit any agendas at this point. They probably did. You'll notice that I sneakily dumped one of my foods in the bin because it is super unlikely that they're going to run the bin anymore. They're not going to direct a Temujin there because there are lots of naked assets and there's no other reason for them to run the bin. So that food is probably quite safe. My opponent does get a net quarantine off me, so that's a few more points to their favor. And do I jam the build here? I think about it for a while and I do decide to go for the build, and to make it more obvious that's the build, I'm going to put the third piece of ice on it. So they're going to check the empty remote first. Of course, that's not the build. And yeah, once again, they are forced to play cat and mouse. It's a cat and mouse game. Where's the mouse? There's one mouse in the game. You have to find it. It's in the remote right now. It's not in HQ. I didn't bother resting the HQ ice, obviously, because I needed every single credit I could muster to defend this build. So they run HQ twice. They're not going to get anything. And they're going to attempt... Ooh, Archangel. Thought about it for a while. Saw they have 12 stealth credits. Forget it. And they're probably going to run my remote last click. So I res the double Raven here. And at this point, they knew they couldn't proceed. If they took both on-encounter tags, there would be the Zealous Judge that would be active. And everything will come crashing down on them. So because of the double Raven, I was able to get the build out for the victory. Well, as you can probably tell, I wasn't satisfied with this victory at all. The only reason I managed to win was because I lucked out. My opponent did not check either of the builds. I basically gave to them. You know, they just dropped on the table. I accidentally dropped my cards in my hand and they didn't pick it up for me. Well, I don't consider that a good win con at all. I don't know about you, but it feels very unsatisfying to win just because you vomited out a bunch of assets and whoops, they just didn't check the 2 that happened to be agendas. I mean, they were doing active spot checks. It's not like they were playing completely passive. So I feel like that was pretty dumb. And the only reason I managed to actually pull out in the end was because towards the mid to late game, they were being forced to actually spend every single click. I mean, every time I spend a click installing a new asset, they were forced to match that click in checking it. And I'm not sure about you, but I don't feel that that is really what I say the core set spirit, which is ironic because it's exactly core 2.0 that brought this upon NBN. Another point I want to bring up is, yeah, it really comes down to the agendas. You saw that basically the only route I had to victory against a non-tag me runner is scoring 3 builds and a QPM. That is such a specific scoring suite for any deck. I mean, like, what are the chances you are going to be able to score like that and to have your builds uncontested? It goes without saying that if I lost any single one of my builds, I would not have been able to score at all. My opponent could easily just sit back and wait till something got advanced. And that comes down to Astroscript and breaking news being gone. It's as simple as that. When you take out the agendas that NBN has wanted to score, well, what can they do? If you look at NBN's entire history in Netrunner, these are the only 3 agendas they want to score. Can you think of any other time they want to score any other agenda? even though a bunch of 4.2s have been printed for NBN, a lot of them have a huge variety of effects, but none of them get played except for Explodapalooza, but that's a defensive one. I mean, yeah, it activates on the runner stealing it, not you scoring it, so different story. All the other 4.2s are not played, not because they're too weak, but because NBN, from the very beginning till now, had no good ways of scoring 4.2s. So, Core 2.0 doesn't change that. 4.2s are still just as unviable as last time because NBN does not have the means to score big agendas. So, the best they can do is, I forgot what it's called. I think it's Franchise City? No, I don't think it's the other one. The one that gives you an advancement token at the start of your turn. Sorry, I forgot the name of it. But even that relies on shell games as well. I could try to make an asset spam deck that has that asset as a component and plays a bunch of 4-2 agendas. But honestly, they're just going to check it. And they're going to score the 4-2s. What are you going to do? So, this is the thing that needs to be fixed. Either the agenda suite or give NBN some way to score 4.2s that, you know, doesn't rely on tags, because honestly, landing tags is so hard nowadays. Not one more thing I want to mention before closing out this video. Really, I miss Jackson Howard so much. Jackson Howard would have ended this game way earlier. I would have gotten those hard-hitting users back in, my opponent would have been tagged, I would have closed their accounts, and the cycle would have came not long after. This definitely should be a museum deck with the absence of Jackson Howard, because I so badly needed the recursion for those hard-hitting users. It was such a drag in the mid to late game knowing that there were no more hard-hitting users left in my deck, and I was forced to either get a Zealous Judge fire or wait for my opponent to make a mistake sometime during the game. That is not really where you want to be. You want to be in the driver's seat, forcing the runner to make tough decisions, with the threat of a proactive tagging card like Breaking News. I firmly believe rotating Breaking News out was a terrible mistake, unless something comes in to replace it in the upcoming Kitara cycle. NBN as a faction will be no fun. Thanks for watching Happy Net Running. The next time I'll see you, we'll be doing the runner side Core 2 analysis.